ready, Scott? Good to the 2021 Remembrance Day service here at the Story Arts Center of the School of Communications, Arts, Media, and Design, Centennial College, where we'll open today, who is from our, Kevin is from our MIAP program, which is the Music Industry Arts and Performance Program with 𝘿𝙖𝙣.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons' command. Quand on passe porter le pays, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Kevin. That was wonderful. Thank you. If you could be seated, please. This is a very special moment for us here at Centennial College because COVID has brought us all together in one place. Normally, we have 5 different ceremonies that are held simultaneously across the college in our 5 different locations. Today, we are all together. And I thank our honored guests today. And I thank all of you from the college for coming. I'd like to pass a small remark, if I can, about our color guard. Our color guard is from our paramedic program. And I am deeply, personally, very deeply honored to have them here today because if you think about it, paramedics and what they have to go through and what they do for us as a society is about as close as you can get to being in combat as a combat medic as you can get without being in the military. and I'm deeply honored to have them here with us today. My name is Malcolm Kelly, and I am a professor here at Centennial College in the Sports Journalism Program, coordinator. I am also the son of two Second World War combat veterans. My father, William Thomas Patrick Kelly, was a bandsman in the Rifle Brigade. And at the beginning of the war, when you were a bandsman, it meant that you went in combat as a stretcher bearer. My father was at Calais, at the defense of Calais in May of 1940, which was described as the 6 days. And he was one of the famous in Britain 47 survivors who were pulled off the East Mole by HMS 𝘿𝙖𝙣 after the town had fallen. My mother, Nora May Kelly, was originally née DeLong, grew up very poor in Bristol. And in November of 1940, when the Luftwaffe started bombing other cities in Britain, she had her house blown out from around her, and my grandmother and her were hiding under the stairs. And because of the stairs, that saved her. So I've always liked to consider my mother as a combat veteran. And then she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the ATS, in Britain, which, by the way, was where our Queen, Elizabeth II, she served in the ATS. Today we remember. Today we remember those of us, today we remember those who gave their lives to our country through all of the wars that Canada has fought in the 20th century and the 21st century, from the Boer War up to Afghanistan. We remember Private George Price. In 1918, at 10:58 a.m., George Price was standing on a street in Mons, in Belgium, and he was hit by a sniper and killed 2 minutes before the end of the First World War. He's considered to be he is the last Canadian casualty. History considers him one of the final casualties of the war. For Malcolm McIver. Malcolm McIver grew up not more than 100 meters from here at 151 Mortimer Avenue. He went to Easter Collegiate Institute, where he was an outstanding athlete and student, where he was what they would refer to back then as a big man on campus. He was quiet, he was reserved, and he was beloved. Malcolm went off to fight from his house, was able to complete 30 missions, 30 operations with Bomber Command as a navigator. And Malcolm then had his 6 months of teaching, of instructing, and he was getting back into it to be a navigator on mosquitoes, and there was an accident when he was in an Oxford, airspeed Oxford, and he died. And his younger brother, Jack, decided he was going to go too, but instead of being a navigator, which he could have been, or any other member of the crew, Jack chose to be a rear gunner so that he could get into combat as quickly as possible before the war was over. 18 months after Malcolm was killed, Jack was killed. We remember today Trooper Karine Blay. Trooper Blay was a member of the Band 𝘶𝑢𝑠, the Royal 22nd. And in April of 2009, she was killed in Afghanistan by an IED. Her mother, Madame 𝘿𝙖𝙣 𝙈𝙤, in a few minutes, will be laying a wreath in Ottawa to represent all of the mothers across the land who have lost children, their children in the war. Madame is this year's National Silver Cross Mother, and we remember her too. It is a day that, for many of us, is very personal, and it is a day that, for all of us, we need to remember not just their names, a list of names on a cenotaph, away perhaps of your former high school, that each of these people was a person behind that name that they lived and they loved. And sometimes because of their age, they were goofy. And they cared enough to go and fight. And they gave their lives. And that today is what we are remembering. I'd like to begin now by asking the rest of the color guard to please bring our midget.
To the right, right, turn. Color parties, deposit the colors. Let fly the colors. Honor guard, stand at Ieds.
Was honored with these flags as a gift. And it is a gift that we have, as a school, taken very seriously. And I wanted to take this moment to explain what the flags are, because a flag, if you do not understand the context of a flag or any banner, then it becomes simply a piece of cloth. And the context is what brings it life. The first flag I'd like to show you is the flag on the left. And sir, if I could ask you to just please unfurl that flag just a little bit so people can see it. That is the flag that represents the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. And it is a very beautiful flag with the eagle on it and the people's land we are on. The second flag is the Metis flag. And if I could get Pearl. Thank you. That is the mathematical infinity sign, and it represents the Métis in Canada. The third one with the absolutely beautiful Thunderbird on it. This flag represents the Anishinaabe Confederation, Huron and Mississauga, and the Wenda. And it's also, as somebody who is a Royal Canadian Air Force historian, it's also a very wonderful flag for me too, because number 426 Squadron used the Thunderbird as its squadron logo all during the Second World War, and it is still used by number 426 Squadron. Thank you very much. The 8th of November is National Indigenous Veterans Day. And today I'm a little bit sad that we cannot have a couple of friends that I've lost this year who were Indigenous, and we lost in the last year, and it would have been wonderful. But on the 8th, we recognize all of the Indigenous soldiers who gave their lives over our history. And I'd like to, in their honor, first of all, read the land. Centennial College is proud to be a part of a rich history of education in this province and city. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and pay tribute to their legacy and the legacy of all people. As we strengthen ties with the communities, we serve and build the future through learning and through our graduates. Today, the traditional meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the communities that have grown in the treaty lands of the Mississauga. We acknowledge that we are all treaty people and accept our responsibility to honor all our relations. Olympics, there is a story that gamblers got a hold of the drinks of 3 of the mainlanders. That's never been proven, but it's sort of an accepted thing. When the First World War began, Tom Longboat volunteered for the Canadian Forces. And you can imagine, as somebody of that talent as a runner, was runner. It was a communication in the most dangerous jobs that you could possibly have. Because if the other side saw you running a message from one place to another, remember this is pre-radio, if the other side saw you, because they knew that if they got you, the message would die with the runner. And that's why both sides tried so hard to do that. Tom Longboat survived the entire war in the trenches as a runner. He was declared dead twice because he had disappeared, and once into a hospital from his unit. He was declared dead so convincingly the second time that his wife remarried. And they discussed that when he got home. But there is told where Tom is running, doing his job, and he's running by, and he stops, and he's barely even out of breath, and he hands a message to a colonel, and the colonel, and then he takes, "Who do you think you are, Tom Longboat?" And he says, "Longboat." Isn't that an incredible story? I love that story because of the respect that it gives. I remember today Tommy Prince. Tommy Prince was a member of the Broken Head Band, and he joined up in 1940, and he became a sapper in the Royal Canadian Engineers. But where he made his name for himself was in the 1st Special Service Force, which some of you who are old enough to remember seeing the William Holden movie, was the Devil's Brigade. And they were a very special unit of the absolute best of the best, if you want to put it that way. A combined unit of Canadian and US troops whose job was to go do the jobs that other people couldn't do. They fought on Attu in the North Pacific, they fought in Italy, and they fought in France. Tommy was an incredibly brave man among a unit of incredibly brave men. At one time, he spent 24 hours as no more than spitting distance from the German lines in Italy, keeping in contact by radio with the artillery behind him, so he could call down fire that was practically on top of himself. He is one of the few who have a military medal from Canadian Forces and the Silver Star from the American Forces. And now it is my honor to welcome the president of Centennial College, Stevenson.
Thank you, Malcolm. Good morning, everybody. When I was first part of ceremonies at Centennial College, I have to be honest, I felt a little underqualified, having only lived in Canada a while. But commemorating Remembrance Day wasn't new to me. Indeed, like so many of you, this day holds a deep personal significance for me and my family. Ever since I was a child living in England, I have attended Remembrance Day ceremonies, and I've worn a red poppy with great pride, largely because my great-great-uncle served in World War I, and my grandfather served in World War II, and my great-uncle in particular saw a lot of action on the front lines, fighting against the enemy alongside Canadians and other Allied forces. My aunt also served during World War II as a member of the Women's Land Army, and I always on this day carry her lapel badge to remember my aunt. And that's why I'm here. You are too, to honour their service and to reflect upon and celebrate that here in Canada, the freedoms we enjoy, the democracy we experience, and the quality of the relationships we have with each other and people across the world, we owe very much to those who selflessly put themselves forward for the armed forces and sacrifice their own freedoms and ultimately their lives to defend ours. Today, I'm going to read the poem Remember by 𝘿𝙖𝙣 𝙊𝙛𝙛, Chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Indigenous people have demonstrated great service for Canada through their military participation in times of conflict, as we've heard this morning. We recognise that many Indigenous veterans were not treated with the same respect and consideration that non-Indigenous veterans received when they returned home. Over 12,000 Indigenous people served in the First and Second World Wars, as well as the Korean War. We honour the memory of the approximately 700 members of the Indigenous communities who gave their lives in Canada's war during the 20th and 21st centuries. So I'll begin the poem by Chief 𝘖𝙘 𝙊𝙛𝙀. To all those who have gone before, to all the people that went to war, to the men and women who faced death, to those who will never again draw breath, to the mothers and fathers whose children gave all, to the husbands and wives whose mate answered the call, to the child who faced life on their own, to everyone who talks to a name on a stone. No ribbon can repay all that we owe. The parade and applause are not enough, and we know. How do you thank someone for everything you have and everything you are? Never could we have accomplished so much or come so far. I want to say thank you, but no words are enough for what you went through. There is one promise that I can give, one oath I shall never break for as long as I live. I will remember that we all owe to you, a person, a people I never even knew. I will remember.
Thank you, sir. And now we're going to move to where we interview our very special guests. And I'm told I can pick this up. Without breaking it. Yay. Okay. I'd like to begin. Good morning. I would like to begin with Commander Leanne Crow. Commander Crow is from the Royal Canadian Navy. She has been in the service for 37 years. Does that count the time that you were in Sea Cadets?
I was actually in the Naval Reserve.
You were in the Naval Reserve.
And,
all right.
It's 38 years now.
Just 38 years.
Not that I'm counting, but I'm counting down now.
Oh, you're
actually.
counting downwards. Yeah. All right. And you are a Mustang. You came from the ranks right up to Commander, which for those, for information, Commander in the Navy is equal in rank to Lieutenant Colonel in the Army. 37 years is a long time. When you look back over your career, your service, what are the things that you think about?
Well, the first problem is trying to remember things from when I first joined, but I joined here in Toronto at HMCS York, which is the Naval Reserve Unit down on the lakeshore that some people may be familiar with. And I had no family that was in the military, and I had no friends in the military. It was a bit of a lark for a summer job. And 38 years ago, I went down, signed up, and never looked back. But I remember my time as a reservist quite fondly because that was my foundational years in the military. And then when I transferred to the regular force and took my commission as an officer, that was also sort of a stage in my career and in life that was rewarding, and an opportunity to lead the fine men and women that are in our forces. So that was always a good thing. And then I became a clearance diver, which was a qualification that I had sought and achieved, and that meant a lot to me. And working within the diving branch in the Navy was a particularly fond memory. I commanded one of the diving units on the East Coast, so that was great. And currently I am teaching young officers up at the Canadian Forces College, and that's also rewarding because those are our future leaders. So if I can have any kind of impact on their future, that would be great.
And you were the first female construction diver in our country's history.
Yes, I qualified in, I dare say the year, 1992, in case some people weren't born yet in the audience. So I qualified in 1992. It's a year-long course, the clearance diving course, and it was in Halifax. And it was a tough go, but it was so it was a great accomplishment.
And you proudly wear the golden dolphins and the diver's helmet under the crown, which is quite an achievement. And we were talking and I've talked to some people around here who I know do sort of dive for fun. As a construction diver, you are checked out to 19 feet. What is it like being down 90 meters?
So you're in someplace nice to dive, which probably people that do recreational diving do. It's wonderful, but the type of diving I do is frequently black and you can't see anything. And in fact, there's no point in having lights because you can't see anything. But we use different types of equipment depending on what we're doing and the depth we're going to. So it's interesting learning the science and the technical aspects of the different types of equipment and how to use it and how to supervise dives using those different types of equipment.
And one of the things that it's an incredible list I looked up, things that construction divers do. Somebody said to me, she can blow things up and she can keep things from being blown up, which is quite a skill. But you spent 8 months in Afghanistan training people how to dismantle and how to handle IEDs and other explosives. Could you speak just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I worked up in Kabul, in the capital in Afghanistan in 2010, and I worked in the strategic headquarters. So I worked as the training chief for counter ID. So counter ID is any types of operations that are to counter the IED, which threat, explosive device, which was the threat, the main threat in Afghanistan. We counter IEDs in various forms. Most people are familiar with what we would call the tactical level, which is you find an IED, hopefully you haven't set it off, and then you need to get rid of it. Generally speaking, with an improvised explosive, it is activated, you want to destroy it, and so you countercharge it with other explosives. And then there's other parts to the counter ID fight, if you will. So there's the tactical level and actually dismantling or blowing up IEDs, but there's also trying to ensure that IEDs are never built in the first place. So that is collecting intelligence and trying to figure out where they are getting the supplies to create the IEDs, and also who the bomb makers are, and try to eliminate that chain of supply to develop IEDs and to capture some of those folks that are the bomb makers. So there's a lot more to it than just what you see in the movies with what we call the lonely walk, which is in the bomb suit going down on an IED. And I was responsible for training the Afghan National Security Forces, so that includes the Afghan police and the Afghan army, and would go to the training areas around Afghanistan where they were doing their training and making sure that they were correctly using the procedures that we're teaching them.
Commander, we thank you for your service, and we thank you for your continued service moving along. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Leanne Craig. Colonel Rick O'Neill. And Rick has a family tie here to the school because his son, who's around here somewhere, there he is at the back with the hand. His son is a member of our postgraduate sports journalism program, and he has just started actually working at TSN. So we got your son taken care of.
Thanks. He's off
Yes.
the payroll now, finally.
Yes. Sir, 33 years for you in the Canadian.
Yes.
Can you explain for us for how you first became involved?
Yeah. Actually, I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, and I graduated from the University of Windsor. I moved here to Toronto, was working for Ford Motor Company's finance department, looking out the windows occasionally going, I need to find a profession rather than a job. So again, like Leanne, I enrolled from here in Toronto, quickly found my way to British Columbia for training, Saint-Jean, Quebec for language training, Borden for logistics training, and from there I've spent an awful lot of time in 𝘾𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤, which is in North.
And sir, you have done 4 tours. You did 3 tours in Afghanistan. You did a tour in Yugoslavia, which must have been a very interesting story in itself. Could you, as we did the 3 places in Afghanistan that you served, because they were really quite different from each other.
Yes. Now I've got a unique experience. I was one of the actually the first large rotation that went in Kabul. Last rotation 10 years later was in Kabul as well. So I got to see the transformation from really civil war Afghanistan in 2003 to some of the improvements. And one of the things I like to reflect back on it, especially at times like this, and some of the things you see in the media, is still to take a look and think about some of the improvements and successes we have achieved, not just Canadians, but the coalitions in general, and some of the improvements. You could see those improvements 10 years later. So I do like to reflect back and keep things in perspective on what we may have achieved, not just what we didn't achieve, but what we did achieve. And not only as Canadians, but coalition, and most importantly, the Afghan national forces, whether police forces, security forces, the amount of blood and treasure they put into improving their country as well.
And when you reflect, because you were there so many times, when you reflect, not politically, but when you reflect on each of the individual soldiers and sailors and airmen and airwomen who served in Afghanistan, what do you think about it?
So on a day like this especially, I had one close colleague that I worked with that actually, on his very first tour when he was going over on a reconnaissance, was killed in an IED. Didn't got there to serve his tour yet. So, and we worked very closely together in 𝘾𝙤𝙤𝙤 at the Brigade headquarters for a 2-year period. So I think a lot about him and his family at a time like this. I also just think in general about all the soldiers, a number of times, whether it was Canadians, US soldiers, other coalition forces, especially in Kandahar, where we would have a ceremony, which, you've seen the shots in CBC. I really think back of the number of times going to say farewell and honor the soldiers that were making their final journey home, wherever that may have been.
Colonel, thank you for your service and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Malcolm.
Well, here's the story. Dan Middleton joins us. Dan's father, Bob Middleton, was as good a friend of this campus's Remembrance Day ceremonies as you can imagine. He was here so many times. And Bob served in the Second World War, 431 Iroquois Squadron, 33 operations, and survived. He liked to call himself a nosy navigator, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Bob was invited to this year's ceremony again, and he was all set to come. And on October 13th, Bob passed away in his sleep at the age of 98. There's a tradition in the Air Force called the Missing Man Formation. And the missing is 4 aircraft approach where an airman or airwoman is and of the 4 aircraft, number 3 then suddenly pulls straight up into the air, so that when they come over like that with a missing plane in the formation. And we thought that today, to honor Bob Middleton, if I could get you, Dan, just to step out of the way for a second, to honor Bob Middleton, that we would have a missing man formation here among the chairs. And this is Bob. This is Bob's Legion jacket and all of Bob's medals from the Second World War. And also, we'll talk about this in a second, but tremendous achievement. Dan pushed his father into getting his memoir, and they summer. And that is the book, 𝘿𝙗𝙣 𝙈𝙤𝙤 𝙊𝙛𝙛𝙞𝙘𝙠. And Dan, please welcome, and if I have you come back over. First of all, we are sorry for your loss, and me too, because Bob was such a good friend and I appreciate it so very, very much. Your dad believed so strongly in Remembrance Day.
Yeah, I guess every Remembrance Day he believed that the younger people, I guess anybody, 25, 30, should be bearing the flag to continue the tradition of taking care of our great country and representing our great country.
Your And as they were going over, until it was time to turn and give his next navigational fix.
One time, yeah. Well, yeah, one time he was up out of his seat and where he would have been sitting in his bench.
Yep. Came right through where he would have been. So because he was being a nosy navigator, it actually saved his life. After the war, your dad comes back, and it was a very interesting thing because, and I only learned this from your dad, I've always thought that when you came back, they gave you money to go to school. But Bob explained to me that they gave you money to go to school, or they gave you a piece of land with the rule that you had to build on it within, I think it was 2 years, in order to keep the piece of land. So your dad, who went to Danforth Technical School and was tremendous with his hands, he came back, got his piece of land, and then what did he do?
Built himself a house with his bare hands, with no power tools. So in 1948, their house was finished on south side of Kingston Road, just west of 𝘿𝙗𝙣, and still there.
And it was the road that they were on that they built the house, which is still there. Because he was the first house, he got to name it. He named his own street, which was rather neat. And then Dad put in a long career at Bell Canada, and then retired, and has left quite a family legacy with your family. Perhaps you could detail the number of legacies that he has left, including his great grandson, who's with us today.
Yeah, yes, I have three kids. the 2 girls and 1 boy, Chris. So that's my son, Chris, over there, and that's his son. So that's Dad's, great-grandson.
And how many grandchildren and great-grandchildren?
I have 7, and Dad had, I have 7 grandkids, and Dad had 9 great-grandkids. Because there's two in Calgary.
Yes. That's a lot. All right, and to finish, if we could talk about 𝘿𝙖𝙣 𝙈𝙤𝙤𝙬𝙗.
Yep.
All right. This is your dad's book, and you had to push your dad to do this.
His idea.
But he didn't believe you were going to be able to do it.
It was like, he was, for a longest while, he was humoring me. Oh, we'll let Dan write a story, and then he got into it too eventually.
And it came out this summer.
He realized what it was about. And we finished it and published it on Amazon on April 30th this year.
And today, we have here, outside the back, just over here, if anybody would like to pick up a copy, Dan is going $10, and all the $10 is going to go to the National Museum, which is the home of NA 337, the only legit Halifax bomber left in the world. And that book and that money goes to help support what the causes that they do. Thank you so much, Dan. I am about to embarrass myself. It is at this moment that we ask the color guard to march to the front, but because we had to hold the guard place in order to hold the flags in place, we will not march the color guard to the front. I would like to ask, and if you look in your program, you'll see the act of remembrance, and I'd like to ask Patrick Robinson, who runs our theater program here, to come forward to read the act of remembrance. It's very short, and then you'll see that there's a part at the bottom that is your part. Patrick.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember.
We have with us today Sergeant Jonas Feldman of the Royal Canadian Army, and for the last post. But before we do it, I would just like to take a minute to explain what the last post is. At the end of each day, on bases around the world, the last post is played at the going down of the sun. But it has a second meaning, and the second meaning is when we're on Remembrance Day, and the last post is a call. And it's a call to the dead to gather, oftentimes to welcome newcomers who will be with them after the ceremony is over. I'd like to ask everybody, please, to stand. The last post will play, then there will be 2 minutes of silence, then we will have the rouse. you please take your seats. I'm sorry, that was just amazing. I did not plan that. I did not ask for that. That was just something that just happened. And it's incredible. And I can hear the Harvards behind me from the Canadian Harvard Aircraft Association, who I also did not phone. But what a moment. And here they come. They're just out of our eyesight right now. And the Harvard aircraft is an amazing training aircraft. Bob Middleton. And there goes the military transport aircraft again from Trenton. In the spring of 1915, John McCrae, day before, had lost his closest friend, came out of where he was working as a doctor. He was a frontline combat doctor in the lines at Ypres during the second Battle of Ypres. Ypres was known to, as probably our president would know, Ypres was known to the common soldier as wipers. And as a journalist, it always makes me smile. It always makes me smile. Because there was an incredible magazine that came out during the First World War, all during it, that was put out by two Royal Engineers called the Wipers Times. And it was magazine. John McCrae stepped out of his dugout and he looked around and he was looking at the grave that he had that held his best friend. And already poppies were growing around it. The men realized during the war that no matter how many millions and millions of shells fell in no man's land, the poppies would continue to grow. They just would. The other thing that would happen is that for some reason, even though all the trees had been destroyed, the larks still stayed. So he wrote a poem about it. There are two different stories about that poem. One story has it that he wasn't very satisfied with a few of his friends, and they took it from his coat and they passed it along to Punch magazine, who published it in December of 1915. The other story is that McCrae himself tried to sell it to a couple who was already a poet, a published poet, before he joined the forces, that he tried to get it published and nobody was interested until Punch picked it up. We won't know, we'll never know which the real story is. What we do know is his words, this Canadian doctor's words, became the most famous poem to come out of the First World War. And it's the one that we now use and have always used in our ceremonies. John McCrae did not survive the war. He died as a lieutenant colonel in January of 1918, just after he had been made military director of the British forces in France. He died of pneumonia and meningitis because his body had been destroyed by 4 years in working as a doctor in the trenches. But his poem lives on. And this poem speaks for the dead. And it continues to have an incredible effect all these years later, which is now 106 years later. We are very pleased to have with us today Mr. Lenny Segovia, who is from our Theater Arts and Performance program. And Lenny is going to do the poem Flanders Fields for us. Lenny, please.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow. row on row that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard, amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved, and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up, or to you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
I now ask Scott Greenaway. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our Remembrance Day ceremony. Our piper, who is our college piper, and I know some of you recognize Scott because he is at every one of our graduation events. Scott Greenaway will now lead the color party and our special guests out. They will go this way and around and come out, and then we will be able to gather and have a chat. I thank you so very, very much for taking the time to come here today and honor our veterans. Scott? It has just struck me that Malcolm forgot something. Kevin? It was the planes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen.
Our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
And on that note, good morning.